Hi, I'm Ziyan Junaideen once again, and last week we talked about for loops, while loops, and the conditional if statement. And today we're going to look into more about programming some of the valuable concepts called functions. So, in a function, what we do is we take a set of code that perform a related task. A related task. That means, like, you'll need to write a couple lines of code to do a specific task, and to do that task, the code you've written is sufficient if it comes to any number of situations. For example, if I tell take the average of a list. We talked about lists in a previous lesson. I believe it's lesson 3. And if you want to average it, what you have to do is you have to take a list, go through its values, sum them up, and count how many items there are in the list. And if you divide the sum by the count, you'll get the average. So this set of codes will be general. All what you have to do is to give a specific list, and it will give a specific average of the list that is given. So while doing something like this, we do something what we call as code reuse. In the sense, you don't have to write the same thing over and over again. Rather, you write a function for it and call it many times. Okay, so a function will take some arguments. That means values that you need to execute, and it might or it might not return a result. And over here what we have is the structure of a function. It starts with a def command, def, and thereafter you'll find the function name. The function name, that can be anything, let's say list average, and thereafter you open parenthesis and enter the arguments that you have to enter. Okay, so to get the average of a list, what you have to do is you have to give the list over here. So it will only be one argument, and depending on how many variables, how many values you need to get into this function to do its task, the number of arguments will vary. Okay, so you have the arguments within parentheses, and thereafter you have the colon. Thereafter a few lines of code that will do the specific task. And somewhere in an object-oriented programming book, I read that it's best to keep a function kind of atomic, in the sense keep them small as possible, and that it's very good to have a limit around 15 lines of code. If it exceeds, it's okay, but generally try to keep it small. Okay, that's about something that I've read, and I practice that as well, because it enables more code reuse when you use more function. And now let's go into some examples. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to define a function first, and what we're going to do is we're going to give out a greeting message. Okay, what we're going to say is we're going to take the first name, the last name, and we're going to say hi, welcome to lesson 5, something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say def, and I'm going to say welcome message. Welcome message is the name of the function. Then I'm going to say first name, and I'm going to say last name. Okay, name. Alright, so I have two variables over here, two values that will be arguments to the function. In the sense, when this function is called, you look into the calling of the function, you have to give two values, otherwise it will not work properly, or it will cause an error. So I said def, I gave a function name welcome message, I opened and closed parentheses and put two variables or two values as the arguments, and now I'm going to put the colon and enter. So the function is going to be real simple. It's going to print a message, print hello hello, and it's going to say the first name, and it's going to put a space and last name, and it's going to say welcome to Injex 2010. Okay, Injex was a engineering exhibition that was held in the Faculty of Engineering, University of Peradeniya. That's where I studied in 2010. So it's going to be a simple welcome message, and I'm going to enter, and now we have a function named welcome message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this function. So all what I had to do is I'm going to say the name of the function, welcome message, and I'm going to open parenthesis. It says there are two variables, the first name and the last name, two arguments, and I'm going to say first name is Ziyan and the last name is Junaideen. That's me, and I'm going to enter, and here it goes. It says hello Ziyan Junaideen, welcome to Injex 2010. Okay, right. So what happens if we change the order of the arguments? For example, if I say welcome message Junaideen and Ziyan, okay, the output will be hello Junaideen Ziyan, welcome to Injex 2010. The thing is, the first input or the first argument will be taken as first name over here, okay, and the second argument, which is Ziyan, will be taken as the last name over here. So if you're not specifying what type of what is the keyword or what type of variable this is, you have to maintain the order properly. For example, my name, first name is Ziyan, last name is Junaideen, and what I have to give is Ziyan, Junaideen, two arguments in the proper order for the function to properly work. And well, that's some of the simple functions I can think of. We'll look into some of the types of arguments you can have, variables. So there are four types of arguments. They are the required arguments, keyword arguments, default arguments, and variable length arguments. Okay, so what we experienced over here is the required argument, and I'll show you why it's required. So if I say welcome message and I don't give any arguments, it'll say welcome message takes exactly two arguments and 0 is given. And if I say something with one argument, it'll say exactly two arguments and 1 is given. And what you have to do is you have to give the exact number of arguments that it needs. And over here, when I give more arguments, it says again 3 is given, but we only need 2 arguments. Okay, so because the first name and the last name are required arguments. If you don't supply them, there will be an error. And okay, so what you have to do is you have to give the exact number of arguments, or it will cause an error message. And let's just write an example function that is a little bit more complex, as I talked about the average of a list. So what I'm going to say, def, that's how you start defining a function. I'm going to say list average, and I'm going to take input list. Yep, that's all I need. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to define two variables, addition equals 0, count equals 0, because I need to count how many number of elements it has, and also I need the count and also well, the addition of all the elements in the list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a for loop for I in input list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add these things up. I'm going to say addition equals addition plus I, okay, and I'm going to say count equals count plus 1. Okay, it has to be 1 over here, right? No, yeah, it looks okay, kind of right. I'm not sure if it has to be 0 or 1. I think 0 will be a good value. Anyways, if I'm wrong, correct me later on, okay? And what I'm going to say is I have the addition and I have the count. I'm going to enter, and I'm going to do the calculation after the for loop. So what I had to do is I had to go one step back in this indentation, and I'm going to say value equals addition divided by count, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to print this value. So I'm going to say print the average of the list is value, okay, and that's it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a list with few integers in it. So how we make a list, we use the square brackets. It's like let's say numbers equals open parenthesis, open square brackets, 1 2 3 4 5, okay. Let's see the count of it. It's 3 6 10 15, so the average should be 3, right? So I say numbers numbers list will look something like this, and I'm going to get its average, or going to print its average by calling the list average, and I'm going to say numbers anyway BERS. Alright, here we have the average of the list is 3. So the mathematics within the list is correct, and it gives a value. It actually prints a value within the function. And now over here what we did was we printed a value, okay. And what if we need to get a result that is calculated or generated within a list, a function, sorry, what if we need to get the average back to the user? For example, I need that value saved in a variable. How do I do that? So what we had to do is something similar. We had to write the code. It's called the return value. I'll show how it works. I have the code over here, and instead of this print statement, okay, I'm going to comment it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say return. Okay, return is a keyword. Once again, you see it in this different color, and what you have to do is you have to return the value to the user. So what I'm going to say is return value, okay. So over here it will take the addition and count as 0, add up all the numbers, count the number of elements, and over here we'll generate the value. Let's do some good programming practices, like say the comment generating the average list. Over here we are counting the number of elements, number of elements, and over here what we are doing is we are, well, adding up all the numbers. So keep in mind, always use good practices, write comments a lot when it comes to programming. And if you are in a programming class, let's say something like Introduction to Java or Introduction to Python, as far as I'm concerned, they give marks for these comments. So keep in mind to always use comments to describe the code, what type of code you have written, even if it's very obvious. Okay, so over here what I did was I used the same function that I used before to calculate the list average, and I have this return statement and the value in front of it. So what it's going to do is it's going to return this value to who calls it. At our level, at this program or in this GUI, the caller is this GUI. So once we call the list average, the caller will get the value returned to itself. So for example, I can say list average avg. Let's say list average equals list average and numbers. Okay, so if we look into list average avg, it's a variable. It will say the value is 3. That's because once we calculated the average over here, we return it to who called the function. Okay, who called the function is over here. We call the function and we got its return value to this list average variable, list avg variable. And that's the use of the return statement. The return statement will terminate the program once it returns a value. So if you have it within a for loop, it will exit the program or exit the function then and there. I'll show how it happens. Let's say def test return. We're going to test its capabilities or how it reacts. I'm going to say input list. Okay, something similar. What I'm going to do is, if the value is 3, I'm going to return the index of it. Okay, I'll take 2 values. I'm going to take list and I'm going to say key. Key is what I'm going to search for. Okay, so what it will do is it will I can give a better name for this as well. No, that's good enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for I in list, if we talked about this statement in the last video. If you want, you can. If you're doubtful about it, you can check it out, but it's not difficult. If I equals key, okay, return okay, I have to count the index of it. Okay, we can get something like this. Okay, well, I'm going to cheat over here. I'm going to say no, I'll not use those things. So what I'm going to say index equals 0, return index. Okay, else I don't need to have the else section. I'm going to say index equals index plus 1. Alright, after the for loop, if it does not return a value, that means, or in this for loop, it will go through the list from start to end. And if the value of the list, if the value in the index is not equal, if the value in the index is equal to key, it will return the index. Else, it will return -1 to say that it didn't find it. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to say, return -1. So what we did here was we wrote a test return. We took a list and a key, and we are looking if the key is in the list, and if we get a value that is greater than or equal to 0, it is there, and if it's a -1, it means that the value is not in the list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say test return, and I'm going to give the numbers, and I'm going to say the key is 3. Okay, and it says the index of 3 is 2. So what we had is we give a list, that is this one over here, 1 2 3 4 5, and we are looking for the value 3. It is on index 2. This is index 0, index 1, and index 2. And what it did was it went through a for loop, and when it came to a situation where the key is equal to the list element, that specific element that it is considering at the moment, it will return that index. If not, that means if it's not found in this for loop, that means it's not there, so it will return -1. And if I'm to give some other value, let's say something like 10, the result will be -1. If I give 0, again the result will be -1, because numbers doesn't have either 10 or 0. So that's kind of a well, it's already implemented in lists, but it's a piece of code that you could understand the return statement. So once this return works, it will not reach the next line. What it will do is it will terminate the function. And we also have to look into keyword arguments. Okay, and over here, what will happen if I say test return I'm going to say 0, numbers. It says type error, int object is not iteratable. Okay, this is because we are taking a iteratable object over here, that's implicit, and what it did was over here, it tried to take elements out of it, but it can't, that because it's not iteratable, because it's an integer. So the reason why it is because what Python thinks is 0 is the list that we gave, and numbers is the integer we are looking for. So how can we tell Python that 0 is actually the number or the key that we are searching, and numbers is the list? So what we have to do is something simple. We say test return, give the name of the function, and you see the keywords. We have implicit and key. So I'm going to say key equals 0 and implicit input list equals numbers. Okay. What's wrong over here? Something went wrong. Test. Implicit equals numbers and key equals 0. Okay. Why doesn't it work the other way around? Kind of fishy. Key equals 0. Implicit. Okay, it worked. What did I do wrong? Key equals 0. IMPLIST. Okay, something bad happened then. Okay. I don't know. I can't see anything wrong in it. So what we did was, I'm going to say test. Oops. test return. Okay, when I open up, I get two values, that's implicit and key. And now if I use the keyword key equals 0 and implicit equals numbers, the order of it does not matter, because Python will look into this keyword, that is key, and it will say to the function key is equal to 0 regardless of the order it is in. And over here we got implicit equals numbers, and the interpreter will look into the function and it will say implicit is numbers, and if the order is changed will not be an issue, and that's called keyword arguments. So what we use over here are keywords, and because of them, even if the order is changed or reversed, it will not cause an adverse effect. So you remember, if we do not use these keywords and reverse the order of variables or arguments, it will cause an error. Most probably it will cause an error. If not, it will cause a wrong result. It means erroneous result. And thereafter we have to look into default arguments. Okay, so for example, we can take the same example, but I'll take something different. I'm going to say a new function, again, let's say print me, and this function is going to take two arguments, a name and gender. Okay, so what it does is it just prints print I am okay, I am, and I put the gender, and it didn't go well, right? Okay, let's just do something like this. Name, and we put name, and print age or gender, and then we have gender. Okay, so if I call the function print me, and if I tell Ziyan and M, it'll say, well, the name is Ziyan and the gender is M. And what if I do not give M? Okay, something like that. It says the same error. It's expecting two arguments, but only one is given. Okay, now assume most of the time the gender will be M or male. So what I can do is, when I define this function, I can give a default value to this argument. For example, I have def print me, and then I say name, which is a required keyword, and I'm going to say gender equals M. Okay, over here I said gender equals M, and this will be a default argument. What it does is, if the gender is not specified by the user, it will use the specified value in the function. Okay, and do its function. Over here, if I say print me once again, okay, now it says Ziyan name. And if I want to print something else, I say Ali McBill, no, something else, Sarah is better, I don't know spellings of Ali, and I'm going to say F, and there you go. So because I provided the second argument, it's now taking the gender as F. If not, it will take it as M. So that's a use of default arguments. Okay, and what if you want to put a variable number of inputs? For example, we have the print function. I can say hello, how do you do? Okay, so what we did was we gave hello, how do you do as 5 different letters or words, and what it did was it took all the arguments and printed uh, the result properly. So let's write a similar print function that will not use this type of multiple arguments, and let's see how we can do it. So I'm going to call it print me def new print, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I'm going to take a variable, or I'm going to actually take a what do you call it, it's a tuple as a input. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to put this asterisk in front of everything, and I'm going to say args. Okay, it can be anything, it can be any name, but I'm going to use args. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for each for arg in args. Okay, I need a string over here. Str equals my str equals nothing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add all this to my str equals my str plus arg. Okay, so that's all what I'm going to do. And if I say new print, and if I say something like, let's say 1 2 3 4 5, okay, right, wait, I gave an integer when I have to give a string. Okay, so what I'm going to say is go to the same example. Hi, how are you? Okay, oops, we didn't do anything to the result. That's my that's my fault. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return, or actually I'm going to print my str. Okay, and over here I'm going to add a space. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to again call my print with that same way, and here we have hi, how are you. So how did we define the function? We use this star sign, which is the asterisk, and thereafter we use a variable name, and this variable name will be a tuple. Python will take all the arguments, put it into a tuple, and well, give it to the function. If you doubt it, we can just print what the argument is. So if I say print args, and if I say the same thing, you see this is a tuple. What Python did was it took all the arguments over here and put it into tuple and returned it to the function. And what I did was I went through all these list values or tuple values, and at a time I assigned it to arg and then made a string, and finally I printed it. So this number of arguments is not previously specified. Over here we had two number of arguments, and using this you can even give just one argument, because there's a we call it a default argument. And over here this is a required argument, and you have to provide the exact number of arguments when you call it. And over here the way we define it, it becomes a variable, a number of arguments, and you can call it with any number of arguments. It can be 0 or even 5, 10, 100, or whatever you desire. So if I say new print, there you go, it just prints nothing. Okay, this two brackets is because of this tuple. And that's about variable length arguments. And we've almost finished all about functions, and there's something you have to know about sorry, lambda functions. Okay, lambda, I hope I spell it right, lambda functions. Yep, they're like one-line functions. I haven't found it to be very useful, but I believe there's a good reason for it to be around. And I never was a fan of lambda functions, I must tell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how you can define and use a lambda function. A lambda function is defined just like a variable. You have a name. Let's say hello. Okay, say hello is the name of the function. Remember, we have it over here. Def new print is the function name. New print is the function name, and we use the keyword def. But over at lambda functions, we are not going to use the def keyword. Rather, what we do is we just give the name of the function, and then we say equals. I'm going to say lambda. Okay, lambda, right? Lambda. And thereafter, what you have to do is you have to give the arguments. Let's say arg1 comma arg2, and the result you have to put a colon, and you have to say, well, let's say arg1 plus arg2. Okay, I'm not meant to make it say hello, I'm going to say it's sum. Okay, summation, my sum. Alright, so what it does is it takes two arguments, and then it adds them up together. So if I want to say my sum, and open parenthesis, you see arg1 and arg2, it's the same as we do over here when we say diff new print, and I can give 1 in 2, 32, okay, and I'll get 33 as the result. Okay, so these are lambda functions, and you define it by just the way you define a name. I used my sum equals and the lambda keyword, and thereafter you have two arguments, arg1 and arg2. Each number of arguments have to be separated from a comma. Okay, if you have three arguments, it will be like arg1 comma arg2 comma arg3, and thereafter you have to put the colon and then write the function. Okay, let's say arg1 plus arg2. So this is where you call a function, or you make a lambda function. It's just like a function, but it's like a one-line function. You can't define more lines into it. Okay, it's just this. It's no longer than this. Generally, you can write any function in one line, but you know, let's keep it for the pros. And to tell something about functions that I've forgotten first. Now that you know how to make a function or write your own function, it's about variable scope. Okay, one thing that we haven't yet discussed is about variable scope, SCOPE, something like this, variable scope. Okay, so what is variable scope? Is where a variable will live. For example, this is the global namespace, or well, the global scope. If I define a variable over here, okay, let's say for example my name, and I say my name is Junaideen, and if I write a function, let's say def test function, and if I say print my name, what do you think will happen? There's only one way to figure out. Let's print it and see. Even I don't remember it properly. Okay, I think it should cause an error message. So I'll say test function. Oops. Okay. That's because this is a global variable. And if I need to change this, but yeah, okay. Yeah, global variables are accessible within functions, but the variables defined within the functions are not accessible outside it. So it's like this. If I say um, def test print, okay, function test, and what I'm doing, instead of printing some value, I'm going to say my age equals 25. Okay, so if I say my age equals 25 and I run test function, and if I use my age, they say my age is not defined. That is because this function has its own kind of namespace, and whatever you define within this function is only for this function, and what you define outside the function, it has some kind of a global scope. That means these global variables can be accessed globally from any function within the script, but variables that are defined within the function are not accessible globally. So one way you can do make them access them, or you can actually get the value of it, is using the return statement that we discussed. So if I want to get the age, what I do is I say return my age. Okay, so once we say test function, now we get a value from the function that was generated within it. So if you want to get the value that is within a function, what you have to do is you have to return it to the caller, and the caller will have to do some sort of like variable assignment. For example, I say my age equals test function, and once it runs, my age will be 25. Okay, I'm 25 years old, actually 24 plus, and that's about the global and local scope. So just remember, if you define a function outside, define a variable outside the function, it will be kind of global and it will be accessible to all the functions within your script. But if you define a variable within a function, it's not accessible outside the script. Okay, and also there's one more interesting or one more important thing to talk about. It's about passing arguments. We talked about arguments previously, and there's something you need to know about them as well. For example, Python kind of although we say a variable over here, we say arg1 or arg2, what is passed is actually a reference to the container in memory that holds the value of the variable. And if you do some sort of change within the function, it will change even the global variable. For example, let's say not the global variable, the argument. I'm going to say change list. I'm going to put a new function named change list, append list. Okay, append list, that's nicer. What I'm going to say is I'm going to get list 1 and list 2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to append them and make a new list. So what I'm going to do is, for I in list 2, I'm going to say list 1 dot append I. Okay, is it append? I think it's append. Let's see if it's wrong. List 1 dot append I, and that's it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to define two lists, that is L1 L1 equals 1 2 3 4 5, and I have L2 equals dot A B and C. Okay, so if I say append list, okay, I have a bad spelling over there, append list, and I say L1 comma L2. I'm passing two variables as arguments, and now it should have appended. So what we did was we gave two values, and now if you look into L1, you see the values of L2 have been appended to, well, L1. Okay, and this is not the same if it's like two integers or two strings. For example, def numbers, let's say numbers, and what I'm going to say is my nums, and I'm going to say n1 and n2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say n1 equals n2. Okay, and if I say a equals 10, b equals 20, and if I say my nums a comma b, what would you expect when I say a, and what do you expect when I say b? Okay, it has not changed. So over here, when I passed a list and changed it within the function, it changed the input or the argument. But when I enter two numbers or integers, and when I change it, it does not change the input arguments. So the thing is, well, these objects or kind of complex data structures are passed as references, and within the function, what it does is it uses the object that is passed into it, not its value. So if you do any sort of change within the function to its arguments to an object like list1 or list2, which are list objects, what you'll have is an altered, well, version of it. So just keep that in mind when you write programs. You might end up with undesired effects. Let's say all you wanted to do was kind of get a new list with all these values, and what you end is appending one list to another. So keep in mind about this well, effect, otherwise sometimes you might fall in trouble. So that's all what I had to talk about functions, and well, I think it took a long time, and I did a lot of errors as well. I'm sorry about that. I wasn't much prepared for this, and well, I hope I've been helpful today, and that's all what I have to say. Well, have a nice day.